Imagine locking $10,000 inside a secure steel safe back in 1995. You leave it entirely alone. 30 years later, you finally spin the dial and open the door. Your stacks of $100 bills are perfectly intact. Not a cent is missing. But if you took that exact same pile of cash to the store today, it would buy you roughly half of what it could have bought the day you locked it away. The physical paper remained identical, but the actual usefulness of that money, what economists call its purchasing power, dropped. This animation shows a shrinking yardstick, which is the best way to understand inflation. We usually think of inflation as the price of a loaf of bread going up, but the bread isn't changing. Instead, the internal yardstick of the dollar itself is shrinking. It takes more of those shrunken dollars to measure the same loaf of bread. Because of this continuous shrinkage, simply leaving your cash sitting in a bank account or a safe guarantees a mathematical loss of your wealth over time. To track exactly how fast our money is shrinking, the government looks at a literal basket of goods. Watch this cart fill up. This represents the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. It measures what urban consumers pay for a fixed set of everyday items, from eggs to rent, and tracks how much higher that receipt climbs year over year. But the Federal Reserve actually prefers a slightly different measure called Personal Consumption Expenditures, or PCE. Notice what happens to the cart here. PCE accounts for human behavior. If beef gets too expensive, people start buying chicken instead. By tracking those swaps, PCE gives a slightly smoother picture of what we actually spend. The government monitors these shopping habits very closely because they actively target a 2% inflation rate. That slow, steady drain on the value of your cash is entirely by design, meant to keep the economy moving. When inflation spikes above that target, it usually happens for one of two reasons. The first is called demand pull inflation. In this diagram, you can see what happens when a large group of people suddenly have extra cash. They all bid on a limited supply of goods. Too much money chases too few items, pulling the price upward. We saw this clearly in 2021 and 2022. Millions of government stimulus checks flooded into bank accounts at the exact same time global supply chains were shut down, creating a surge in prices. The second reason is cost-push inflation. This happens when the raw materials needed to make things become expensive, pushing businesses to raise prices to survive. During the 1970s energy crisis, an oil shock made fuel intensely expensive, which forced the cost of transporting nearly everything else to go up. If a government tries to solve these problems by simply printing endless amounts of new currency, the money loses its value entirely. By 2008 in Zimbabwe, the currency shrank so fast they had to print $100 trillion bills just so people could buy basic groceries. Whether prices are pulled up by excess cash or pushed up by expensive raw materials, the result for you is identical. The savings you worked hard to build rapidly lose their real-world value. To prevent that erosion, the United States relies on the Federal Reserve. You can think of the Fed as the economy's head plumber. Their main job is adjusting the financial pressure valves to keep inflation resting at that healthy 2% mark.
Their primary tool for fighting high inflation is raising interest rates. When the Fed increases rates, borrowing money for a house, financing a new car, or building a factory becomes much more expensive. Faced with higher costs, everyday people and businesses decide to stop spending and save instead. This creates a severe trade-off. To stop your money from shrinking, the Fed has to intentionally choke off economic growth. They raise the cost of living with the specific goal of slowing down the economy, which carries the very real risk of causing a recession and driving up unemployment. On an individual level, this creates clear winners and losers. If you hold all your wealth in a standard savings account, or if you live on a fixed pension, rising prices directly punish you. Your money buys less every month. But inflation actually creates a massive advantage for one specific group. Everyday people who hold large amounts of fixed-rate debt are the biggest winners during periods of high inflation. A standard 30-year mortgage is the perfect example of this. Watch how this math works in this diagram. You borrow highly valuable dollars today to buy a house, but because your interest rate is locked in, your monthly payment never changes. You get to repay the bank over decades using future dollars that have been heavily shrunken by inflation. When structured this way,
debt ceases to be a burden. It acts as a financial shield. The natural shrinkage of money quietly transfers wealth away from the bank that lent the money and gives it directly to the borrower. Of course, you don't have to take on massive debt to protect yourself. To play defense against inflation, you just need to trade your shrinking cash for assets that naturally grow alongside the rising tide of prices.
Historically, owning broad index funds of stocks and physical real estate works well. When the cost of living goes up, businesses simply raise the prices of the products they sell, protecting their profits. Similarly, property owners can raise rents to match inflation. You can also use specific government-backed tools like Treasury Inflation-Protected Securities, or TIPS, and I-bonds. These are unique savings vehicles designed to automatically increase their interest payouts to match the official CPI inflation rate. Choosing to hold on to uninvested cash feels safe, but it is actually a guaranteed loss. Converting that cash into productive assets is the absolute minimum requirement just to maintain your current baseline of wealth over a long lifetime. But the absolute best defense against inflation doesn't require a brokerage account or a mortgage. It comes from actively growing your own earning power. You have to ensure your income rises faster than the inflation rate. If inflation sits at 3% for the year and your salary stays exactly the same, your actual purchasing power just went down. A worker who fails to secure wage increases that outpace inflation is taking a silent, invisible pay cut every single year. Inflation thrives in the dark. It acts as a quiet tax on those who don't understand how it works. But once you see the rules, once you learn to hold productive assets, lock in fixed debt, and consistently grow your skills, you can turn that invisible leak into an engine for your own financial growth.